Welcome to Helping Horse. Today's video is a first in a series of videos to help educate us all on our horse leading method, the Taking the Lead method by Sandy Webster. A couple of years ago, Helping Horse decided to move to this method as a consistent way to talk to our horses. Just like human languages, where everybody speaks a different language to each other around the world, each language is correct, but we have to find common languages to communicate. It is the same way in how we work with our horses in leading and communicating with them. The example I like to use is how to ask a horse to back up. There are multiple ways to ask our horse to back up. Each way is correct. However, we've got to pick one. If everybody uses their own unique way to ask our horses to back up, our horses are going to end up getting confused and ultimately frustrated. And that's what we really wanted to avoid by hanging our hat on one method. This method is wonderful because it is a best practice in our industry and is used by several centers, well, lots of centers around the country, and actually a few in our local community. In addition to our horse leaders being taught this method for lessons, we also utilize this method for our unmounted sessions. That includes unmounted lessons or ground lessons that we use for our student population and our first responders and veterans program. This method is the basis that we teach those participants when they're building a relationship with their unique horse. Taking the Lead method is based on three important principles. The first principle is where you stand while you're leading the horse. The leading position is right behind their cheekbone, and the reason that is important is it puts you in a really good position to partner with the horse and to see their facial expressions and what is going on for them during the time that you're leading them. The second principle is the length of line we use when we're leading them. This method uses a loose line, or like what we like to say is a smile in the line. This allows the horse to have freedom of their head. This is important because horses by nature are claustrophobic. And if you're holding a horse really tight or conveying anxiety through the line, that is going to translate to our horse and they are going to become anxious. The other thing is a horse, in order for them to naturally move, they need to swing their head side to side. By giving them a little bit of line, it gives them the freedom to move their head with their movement. Finally, and equally as important, is by giving a little loose line, we are allowing our riders a chance to guide their horses and learn how to be a rider and a leader on horseback. Finally, the other principle is the phases in which we make requests. So just like working with humans, we don't typically go to a partner that we're working with and make demands. There's a polite way in which we ask requests. Those ways are, many times we'll make a suggestion. Hey, why don't we work on this together? If somebody doesn't respond to the suggestion, we move to a question. Would you like to work on this with me? If it's required, you might have to say to somebody, we need to work on this together. It's a telling. And then finally, if it needs to get done, we say, this has to get done. We're gonna get this done on this date and time. It's the same with our horses. We're gonna make a suggestion. We've got an itchy face here. A suggestion, a question, an ask, a tell, and an insist. Now, what's important about these phases is to take a momentary pause between each phase. The reason being is each phase is asking our horse a question about doing something with us. We need to give them a chance to answer. If they answer, that's wonderful. We move on with the request. If they ignore us, we move to the next phase, which is a higher phase. But again, I cannot emphasize the importance of taking it slow and giving the horse a chance to answer the question. The reason this is important is if we start out by being loud and inconsistent, so we're just making demands and maybe we're asking in different ways, This can be very difficult for horses, which by nature are very, very sensitive and respond to the slightest cues when given the opportunity. When things are loud and inconsistent, horses can get frustrated and confused. And if that frustration and confusion isn't attended to, they will eventually shut down. None of which we want for our horses here at Helping Horse. Start talking about our leading position, and we're going to break it down into components. The first part we're going to talk about is where we stand as the leader in relation to our horse. We really want to look at where we place our shoulder in alignment with the horse's body. So right here we've got their ear and their cheekbone and their neck, and then right in here is this lovely little groove in their neck. If I were to think of us as two puzzle pieces, my shoulder could fit into that nook. That is approximately where I want to stand. So if I were to demonstrate, I am going to stand just right here where my shoulder is aligned with that nook, just behind the cheekbone. The reason this is important is when I stand here, I can, through the corner of my eye, or even just by glancing over, I can see everything I need to see about Rajan's face. I can see her eyes, her ears, her muzzle, and I can read her expressions on how she's doing through the lesson. The other reason it's important to stand here is many times we have sidewalkers behind us. And by standing here, I'm giving the sidewalker who is standing right here at the rider's leg plenty of room without us stepping on top of each other. So it gives plenty of room for the sidewalker. So one of the things we talk about is not getting too far ahead of our horses. So I want to show you, if I'm standing in the correct leading position and I just take one step forward, all of a sudden I can't see Rajan. I have no idea, is she happy? Is she frustrated? She could also nudge me with her nose, and I have no idea what's going on. Similarly, if I start in my correct leading, Rajan's looking at what's going on, so I'll ask her to come back over. If I'm in my correct leading position, and I take a step back at the shoulder, two things can happen. My poor horse sidewalker is now gonna be stepping on my heels and we can trip on each other. And if Rajan chose to, she could bend right in front of me and turn in front of me. And now all of a sudden we're not able to be in a good walking position. The other thing to keep in mind when you're leading our horses is that you're going to create, you as a team, you and your horse are going to create two rectangles. I am one rectangle and Rajan is the second rectangle. I'm a vertical rectangle, she's a horizontal rectangle. Those rectangles need to be in a parallel plane with each other. If all of a sudden her rectangle turns into me or my rectangle turns into her, things are going to start falling apart. So while you're leading, think about standing as two rectangles. The other thing to think about is if I'm going to be a rectangle, my shoulders should be square and facing in the direction that we're moving. So I'm going to have square shoulders in the direction that we're moving, and my eyes are looking where I am going. Try to practice studying what your horse is doing through the corner of her eyes. So I'm looking at you right now, but I can see Rajan's ear, eye, muzzle. It does not mean I can't glance at her. Take a quick glance to check in, but then come back to looking forward. Line management is incredibly important anytime you're leading a horse. There's the safety component and then there's the communication component. The first thing I want to talk about is safety. A line, you never want to coil a line around your hand. So, you know, this is a good example of a coil. The reason being is if the horse were to pull away from me, the coil can close and severely hurt my fingers. So, the appropriate way to collect your line is to do what I call double back on itself. So you're going to take your line and then if you need to double it back as many times as you need to shorten the line. That way if the horse pulls, the line slips right out of my hand. That's the most important safety aspect. I also want to talk about the loose line leading that we've talked about, or the smile in the line. As you can see, I'm standing here with Rajan. I've got the excess line and my stick, and we'll talk a minute about the stick. in my left hand. If I'm leading on the right side, it would be in my right hand. And I'm gonna hold anywhere from about 10 to 18 inches of line. And I've got a smile in the line. It's short enough that I can impact her if I need to for emergencies. Now, I can go shorter with the line and still have a smile, okay? The one thing you wanna make sure of is that you don't go too long and the line is hanging at about my knees, her knees or my knees, because we could be walking and both of us could trip on this line. So that's where the 10 to 18 inches is kind of a good number. The other thing to think about when you're holding the line in the horse is the distance you're standing from your horse. Remember, I have a bubble and she has the bubble. She has a bubble. Those bubbles are our personal space. I have my bubble that I don't want her in unless I ask her to come in. So there I just held a little block to say, no, thank you. And similarly, horses don't like it when we are crowding their space. I like to stand about 2 feet away from my horse, shoulder to nook. I've got nice line distance. If I need to shorten my line, I can take the hand with my left hand with the excess line, or on the other side, the right hand, and I can pull the line to shorten it. That's the best and quickest way to shorten the line. That way I keep my hand on the line, I shorten it, and I've got a quicker use of the line if needed. And then to release it, I just let the line out. So let's talk about why we have this smile in the line. The smile in the line allows the horse to move their head freely when they're moving. A horse naturally needs to swing their head side by side while they're walking. So having that looser line allows them the freedom to do that. The other thing is if I'm teaching a horse to steer, I'm sorry, not a horse, if I'm teaching a rider to steer, I don't want to be micromanaging the line. I want to be able to let the rider have a little bit of freedom to move the horse's head. So having a loose line gives me a chance to follow the rider's direction of the horse, and I can become a follower versus a leader in that situation. Finally, it's very important to understand that you can shorten the line, and many times you should. What's important to understand is what we want to avoid is somebody holding the line short and tight and pulling the whole time they're leading. That creates tension. So you'll see a horse going around the arena and there's a tight hold of the line and the horse is pushing against it. In horses, resistance creates resistance. So by having a short line, I avoid that resistance. Now, if I need to shorten the line, for example, at the mounting block, I can shorten the line, but if I need to make a quick adjustment because I've got a rider mounting, I've got the line ready to do that. Once the adjustment's made, it's important to release. Make sure you release. Always in an emergency situation, go to the line. Whenever possible, we're going to talk a little bit later on about the phases using your stick. Use your stick in phases first and your line last. And whenever possible, try to use checks and releases with the lines, not just holding. Let's talk about the stick, AKA the energy stick. We call it an energy stick because it is a tool to help you increase and decrease energy when working with our horses. In a later video, we'll talk about how you use the stick, but right now I want to focus on how you hold it and positionally where it sits in your body and relational to the horse. So again, to reiterate my leading position, my shoulder is right behind that cheekbone. I've got a smile in my line, excess line in the left hand, and I'm holding my stick with the excess line. Now, you need to hold it at the handle, and if the stick is in neutral, it just needs to be pointed behind me and downward. I have told horse leaders before, it's okay to drag it in the ground. You're not going to hurt it by letting it drag behind you. What you don't want to do is be holding the stick up and walking, because that's going to cause movement in the stick and therefore energy, causing our horses to move. So again, the stick stands at neutral until you need to utilize it and you engage it and move it in whichever way you need to move it. When you engage it for a request, once the horse meets the request, you go back to neutral, and that is the release. Very, very important. Just like we talked about with the line, we want to release the stick.